Right. Come on, bienvenue. Oh my goodness, we've lost one member suddenly. Hopefully she'll return. May I introduce you, if you haven't met him already, Hamish McClay of Search and Convey, our special guest, Silas J. Wigwam. And here we have Zara Oliverkus of Nexa Law, our tame legal eagle. Now, we discuss topics on this show which rather affect how everyone works within the property community, and hopefully we'll all have slightly different opinions. I know that there's certain things that are happening right now that Zara is going to bring to our attention. For once, an entity is refusing to backpedal, but perhaps it's not the most sensible situation one could find oneself in. But today's topic is called the home buying maze. We could call it the home buying maze, the return, if you want. But we're just not done yet. There's more to come. Hamish McClay, would you, as is traditional, start it off, please?
Yes, we embraced on part of our conversation last week. Almost all of our conversation last week spoke about how the legal team were all of a sudden meant to be sort of tax advisors as well, and now they might need to qualify. And that was just another string to the bow of exactly what the conveyancers are meant to be responsible for these days, which just complicates life generally. And really, when we're trying to simplify things and trying to get a smoother operation sort of going, conveyancing just gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And I think we are actually sort of hearing, I mean, it's already been said by many sort of conveyancers this year that some of them are starting to leave earlier than they would have done. And it's almost like the number of people who are sort of deciding that they're going to get rid of, landlords are trying to get rid of their houses as well. But the situation is we don't have sufficient quality conveyancers to cope with the enormity of what is being imposed upon them. And somehow or other, the general public is expecting more and more of their solicitors, more and more of their conveyancers, and not expecting to actually pay a decent amount of money for that to be achieved. And I think we came to the conclusion last week that the majority of people were very, very happy about spending a few £1,000s here and there to go on a couple of weeks holiday, but something they were going to live in for 20 years, they didn't feel it was worth spending that amount of money on.
Zara, shortly before, when we were in the green room, you pointed out the fact that one of the biggest bits of news right now is there's been an awful lot of pressure on HMRC to back down away from this, that everybody has to become an advisor, but they haven't done.
No, they're not. Let's leave that one for another day, because we're going to end up talking about stamp duty again.
No.
So let's focus this one on how buyers and sellers can navigate the maze of looking and comparing, quotes, or should I say estimates, because they are estimates, not quotes.
Right.
Because people ring up and go, yeah, it's straightforward, don't worry. And I always say to people, it's like opening a Pandora's box without looking at the title. I can't tell you how long it's going to take, how complex it's going to be. But even if I've seen the title, I've got lots of other variables to throw into the mix, like who's acting on the other side. And there is a notorious factory firm, which I know a lot of conveyancers would have on their dartboard, and they basically tell their clients to tell the other party to find another solicitor. Otherwise, they will be, because they've gone cheap for a reason. And unfortunately, when you go cheap, you get what you pay for. But also their estimates are misleading, and there was a post with one of their estimates yesterday. They charge £300 for a file opening fee. I mean, that should be included within the legal fees. Who charges £300 just to open your file? They get that money regardless. Whether or not you go ahead, you have to give them £300. They charge another £250 for reporting on your searches, and I think that's wrong because you have to do searches as part and parcel of your due diligence. That's very, very wrong. Acting for your mortgage lender should be included in your fee, as well as all the legal issues. And I don't tell you what complications I've had with people coming back to me on leasehold transactions where they've basically told the client, this is not agreed, this won't happen. I've gone back and spoken to resolve it, and it's been resolved.
Silas, it appears to be that when you peel the first layer of the onion off, you realise there's plenty more layers, and they all smell.
Interesting analogy, Gareth. I very much feel like the property market is becoming a bit like an Ant and Dec behind the scenes meme. I don't know if you've seen those memes where they say they're talking through an earpiece to somebody and they say, "Oh, tell them so and so," and then literally a few minutes later tell them something completely the opposite. And right. I feel like we're getting this whole idea of the government championing home buying reforms. This is what we're going to do. We're going to make everything cheaper, faster, better. And then the next breath is, well, as we discussed last week, all conveyancers now have more work to do and their fees are going to stay the same or even less. And what Zara's highlighting here is a very, very interesting point, and Hamish touched on it to begin with. The average fee for a conveyance in the UK seems to be hovering at around about just over £2,000, whereas if you compare that to a family holiday for a family of four, the average is somewhere between £3,000 and £4,000. Now, that holiday is probably much needed and it's a one-off experience in that year, but you're going to be living in your home for the next 23 years on average. And so to me, the challenge that we have in the property world is, frankly, the professionals at the sharp end are not making enough money. They're not earning enough money. And I think part of this has been perpetuated by the desire for the race to the bottom by headline fees. And what I mean by that is, I saw one yesterday, we'll do your conveyancing for £495. Seems like a bargain to anybody, who's looking for a conveyancing, because we all know all conveyancers are exactly the same, of course, and conveyancing has now become a commodity. So £495 seems really cheap, but then there's this whole sheet of extras that are bolted on, and there's no transparency for the client. And so I think the industry needs to take a good, sharp look at itself, and I'm talking about conveyancers and I'm talking about estate agents in particular, that is this race to the bottom really helping them? Because when you look at the statistics, that only 1 in every 2 homes that actually is listed for sale sells, okay, and then 1 in 3 of those sales then falls through before completion. So there's an awful lot of work that's being done for no reward, and to me that doesn't make any sense. Then you throw into the low fee argument and people undercutting each other, cutting each other's throats at the time when inflation is out of control, costs are escalating. It's becoming a bankrupt business model across the board. And the bizarre element of all of this, Gareth, is that the professionals will blame the consumer, saying the consumer won't want to spend any more, and that is fundamentally not true. What is true is they are not being given the option, and then it is not being framed correctly in a way that makes sense. And what I mean by that is people pay more for convenience. A bottle of water that's 50 pence at Costco can be $5 in a club in Las Vegas because you're in a club in Las Vegas and it's the only bottle of water available. So conveyancers need to be very good, as well as estate agents, at packaging their value in a way that makes sense to the consumer. And if you ask me, would I pay $495 for conveyancing and deal with all of the mess that's been caused recently, or would I pay £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 and have it done tomorrow with little stress? There's the value proposition right there.
Wow, little stress, Zara? That's what we like a bit of. What's your response to what Silas has just said?
No, I completely agree with Silas. And let me give you an example. I've been working with a client who initially went for a shared ownership purchase. And there were a few things that would have broken the deal for them. It was a new build. They were told that they would be allowed to rent out a room.
Right.
And it was also a high risk building. So we went through the conveyancing process. I did kind of try and warn them beforehand. Are you sure you really want to do this? And they went yes. And then as we went through it, we found that we were hitting a load of roadblocks because the seller's solicitors I don't think they were being quite honest, because I asked them who the developer was and they said, oh, look at the planning permission. And I went, that's your client. And they wouldn't give me any confirmation that they would comply with the planning permissions. So I sort of said that was very risky. It was connected to a district network heating system. Now, not a lot of conveyancers know about how adversely that affects the consumer, and yet the government are insisting on pushing these, but you cannot change your providers. And sometimes the companies that are set up are, if you look closely at the behind the scenes structures, you'll see that there are people sitting there that have been put there by the developers. But this particular client decided to pull out of that one. And a couple of days ago, they contacted me about another flat. They sent me a link to the property on Rightmove. Looks very nice, very pretty. Unfortunately, it's in central London. And it's only 4 stories. So I said to them, look, before we go anywhere, you need to ask the estate agent whether or not that building has met the 11-metre height as per the Building Safety Act. And lo and behold, that's nowhere on the listings. But they came back confirming it was. And so I gave them some advice and they thought, well, okay, this doesn't sound like a good idea. But there's not a lot of conveyancers that will basically, get to know the client before they're instructed and basically tell them what's a good idea, what's not a good idea. And some people, this other chap, as I've mentioned before, emailed in the middle of the night saying, I'd like to buy this flat. It's clearly a high risk building. And I told him to walk away. And he said, thank you, I appreciate your honesty. The other solicitor just gave me a quote.
Well, Silas, before I come back to Hamish to round us off for today, it appears to be, and I mean, Zara, you've told me this 100 times before, that you can sometimes give absolutely stonkingly good advice. In this case, walk away, and people just ignore it. And the money grabbing fraternity will come in, give a quote, knowing full well it's going to be at some point extraordinarily painful. Obviously not for them.
Gareth, years ago I used to do some coaching, and one of the things that I realized is that unfortunately we cannot save people from themselves, and that is what Zara's highlighted there, and the sort of question you've just asked is where people are going into these transactions and they've set their heart on something and they won't listen to sage advice by somebody like Zara, who's an ultimate professional. You have to step away and unfortunately let the train wreck unfold, and it's a real shame. We all want to do the best for our clients, we all want to serve at the highest level, but unfortunately the minority will self-destruct for whatever reason. I think the counter argument is also true. There is a real lack of knowledge and expertise across the industry, and I say that with a whole lot of love and respect. That when I'll give you a little bit of praise to what I'm talking about. So I started my career as an estate agent, then progressing to becoming a surveyor, and I thought I knew a lot about property in my early 20s, and then I had the fortunate experience of going into a room full of property investors, hearing them talk about techniques for buying property, and I was completely blown away that I didn't know all of this extra information. And the point of me telling you that story is that I think this is across the board. If you look at a estate agency, does the average estate agent know what a conveyancer does? And the answer to that is probably not. And so their solution is, well, we just chase the conveyancer more because we just need them to do their job and actually get the sale through, because then I can get paid. But that defeats the purpose of actually trying to help the client, because the average conveyancer will receive about 6 phone calls per week per case file. And if they're dealing with say 100 case files, they're spending 80% of their week giving updates and 1 day a week actually doing the conveyancing work. That's the statistics. So the client isn't being educated on the front end because the agent is desperate to win the instruction. And if the agent sat down with the client in a professional manner and said, look, I'll be honest, buying a house at the moment, it's a bit of a difficult process. It's probably going to take you 20 weeks unless we put some provisions in place. And this is what we recommend. And you can set yourself up for success by gathering all of the data that's needed in the conveyancing process right at the very front end, so you have an informed buyer. So when the buyer makes an offer, they're informed of what they're actually getting into. We're going to eliminate as many surprises as possible. And when the memorandum of sale goes out, 300 pages of information hits the solicitor's desk on day one. Okay, it shortcuts the process, and the investment from the client is more than made up for the saving of weeks and weeks and weeks of stress, anxiety, uncertainty, not know what's going on, and all they're being told is, oh, I'll chase a solicitor. It's a complete nonsense. It's not helping the conveyancer do their job. It's not helping the estate agent do their job and actually get paid. It's not helping the client get moved. And so that lack of education is something that needs to be urgently addressed.
Hamish, it appears to be a race to the bottom, a Dutch auction at best, and a lot of people who want to stay delusional because they've had the image that if they push, they'll just get it through quick.
The whole challenge is we've reached a point in society. I think it's quite obvious that we're told one thing by certain people, another thing is that happens to be true. If we've got a government which is permanently sort of lying, I'm not suggesting this government is the first government to be like that. However, it is very, very easy to say things which in truth they aren't part of reality. And but right at the very, very start, Zara mentioned this very challenging issue in the perception of the perception of the buyer, particularly, or the seller. The seller's wanting to sell at maximum sort of monies. The buyer wants to actually sort of buy it as low as they can, and somehow they got to meet in the middle. So it could be overpriced. There could be all sorts of things going wrong with it. But the worst aspect of it is nobody's really speaking to each other. The estate agent probably hasn't spoken to the seller to say, look, buddy, what do you actually want to do? What are we looking at here? Is it is it a quick get out? Is it so they haven't been entirely straight. They just put it on the market, just maybe to trial the market out. So they don't know fully about that. Unfortunately, the buyer, who tends to be in the worst possible position, because they're not necessarily a first-time buyer, but the last time they bought the property was 20 years ago. By God, there's been a change out there. But it's the communication aspect. And as Zara explained, right, if somebody takes the time to speak to their solicitor, to get to know their solicitor, and they can actually start working with somebody they trust, instead of it just being an add-on, oh, we want to buy a house, oh, this solicitor thing, okay, we'll get you. It's not like that at all. It should be very much more involved. And if somebody the buyer gets more involved in what's going on, and they start speaking to people genuinely, because it needs to be the right person that's offering them guidance on the mortgage, for example. Are they getting the right information there? And if everybody's trying to push this thing through and maximize on their profits and not thinking about the person, and there are too many people out there who are willing to get involved with this particular process of conveyancing who are like that, just sit back, relax, and start speaking to people and be honest with people. Be honest about what you want to do. As a buyer, be honest and open with your solicitor. Speak to somebody that you... Unfortunately, if you've got somebody there who doesn't have the time, it's probably because they're trying to do too much work.
Right.
and because they're doing it at cut price. You want value in what you do. You want to be safe there. You want to be safe for 20 years. You want to know what you're buying into is going to be there in 20 years. And the thing is, we hear a lot of these things, and Zara may be all too familiar that somebody's actually getting into a transaction. They don't really own the property, particularly on a shared thing in a leasehold. It is absolutely frightening what they're getting into. But they really need to sit back, take their time and relax into it rather than force the whole thing through. And most importantly, speak to the right people.
I think it's all about expectation setting. I think what should be the default is that buyers should realize there's very rarely a quick, fast turnaround sale, that they should understand that there's a lot of moving parts. And if you want it quick and cheap, then there's probably something that's going to make it not cheap about to hit you further down the line, whether it be a bunch of hidden caveats that you had no idea were there or some other shenanigans. I want to thank Hamish McClare, of course, for setting this up, Silas J. Lees of Boogie Wham, and Zara Olivukas of Nexa Law. And to all of you out there, the most important thing I can say to any of you is find decent people that will tell you the truth and surround yourself with them, because that will pay you dividends in the long term. Until the next time, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars. And in these troubled times, I suggest you try and look after your mental health. Until next week, bye-bye.